Buenos dias, Mick, and thank you for joining us today at Business Spotlight Series. Today, I am excited to introduce Mick O'Connor, Managing Director of Haelo and the founder of Haelo. Hello, Mick, and welcome.
Hello, Avi. Thanks for having me.
So, very exciting businesses you run, and having a pre-chat before the interview, you're a very interesting person for what I've been hearing.
Thank you.
So I'm very excited to interview you today. Haelo is a company that, in short, is a software solution that helps companies to minimize uncertainty and risk. So, Mick, tell us a little bit how you ended up in this business.
So actually, many years ago, I used to be the general manager of the Ministry of Defence live missile test ranges across the UK. And if you get things wrong in that type of environment, it will certainly ruin your day. So whilst I was involved in that, we ended up in a situation where we had an incident. And the incident exposed our management controls as having some flaws and weaknesses because we were using typically dashboards and key performance indicators and all these types of things. And those were telling us that the business was running pretty well in general terms. And then we had an incident. We did an investigation at the incident, and it was then became apparent there was many things that we didn't know. However, there were good people in the organization who knew exactly what was going on. See, these were competent, trustworthy people who were close to the situation. But the way we managed the flow of data, their views, expertise, and opinions wasn't flowing to me as a decision maker. So that was a real tough experience for me, and made me take a step back and think about, how do we get human beings back in the decision loop? At the moment, I think we tend to be over reliant on data, over reliant on technology, but almost at the expense of humans' lived experience. And what I thought is, how do I combine technology? How do I combine data? And how do I fuse that with what we call situational awareness? What human beings know? And I thought if I could do that, that'd be a very powerful source of threat intelligence. So that's where Haelo started. Long before Haelo had a name, I thought, I'm going to solve this problem, but how do you go about doing it? And originally I started Haelo as a consultancy company because I'm not a software guy. And I developed a framework called organizational meshing. And that focuses on 5 things: clarity, focus, rigor, coherence, and mastery. So I developed that framework. I rolled it out to a number of large defence companies who really liked the solution. They liked, I think, the structured solution, the logical approach to the solution. And after one of the assignments, one of the directors said, right, are you now going to go and develop software? And back in 2017, I could hardly spell the word software because I'm just not a software guy. But I thought about it. I spoke to the group operations director of that company and says, well, apparently you may be interested in a software solution. And to cut a long story short, they were. So I took 3 months out, not a clue where to start. But I'm an engineer. So what I did was I thought, right, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? And what would an architecture look like to solve that problem? So I managed to do that, but I got to the limits of my incompetence very quickly because I don't do coding. But then I found a company in Edinburgh who do coding and do it very well. And we developed, I would say, let's say an early stage MVP. I then took it back to that organization and they then bought the solution. So that then took me on this, meandering journey as a software developer. And I wish I knew then what I know now, but I didn't. So I had to go on that journey. So I was very much focused on defence and aerospace companies. But now I'm focused on financial services and a thing called RegTech, which is regulatory technology, because there is a real appetite for technology solutions for regulatory compliance within financial services. And there is a community of people that's involved in it that I can be part of. So that's about Haelo in a bit of a big nutshell.
That's amazing. That's very good. You mentioned, you wanted, the way you started was, what was the problem you wanted to solve?
Absolutely.
Reminds me to one of your favorite books, which is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Start with the end in mind. What is the problem?
Absolutely.
Wonderful,
Absolutely.
wonderful.
And I think that the advice I would give anybody starting, I think, we all come up with good ideas. And I've seen lots of people come up with good ideas, invest in their time, invest in their effort, invest their money into an idea, and then they're trying to find a problem for that idea and that solution to solve. And if you're lucky, I mean, that's a very difficult way to do it. But if you're lucky, maybe you will be lucky. But I think if you start with, what are the problems that people in the world are facing, no matter what market you're in, what are their problems? And really intimately understanding that problem, understand the problem, understand the size of the problem, understand who's got the problem, because that's then the basis of your market. And then go and talk to those people. Don't second guess, what the problems are. Go and talk to them, get it from the horse's mouth, start to come up with at least some outline sketches of what you think a solution could look like and evolve it that way. Now, that's still not easy, but you're more likely to get the right answer and it might land within the market if you're solving a problem that's relevant and there's a market there for that solution.
Brilliant. That reminds me of the founder of Uber. That's how he went to France, and he wanted to get to the airport and he couldn't get a taxi. It was impossible to get a taxi for hours on end. I don't know if he missed his plane, but when he went back to California, he set up Uber to get a taxi on the mobile phone. So he had an idea and executed on that. There was a genuine problem there that many people, including myself, faced. So yeah, excellent, very good, wonderful. So you talked about, so during COVID, you mentioned that you did a PhD. Tell us, in a record time of 13 months. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I took advantage of the whole COVID experience that wasn't particularly pleasant for any of us. But the fact that I wasn't working and commuting away from home, I had more time at home, like all of us. I had became a visiting professor at one of the universities in Glasgow, and they asked me if I'd ever considered doing a PhD. And the answer was simple. Well, yes, I had considered doing a PhD, but I thought I'd be a lot older and a lot greyer by the time I would then do a PhD. Because I thought, well, how would you do it with everything else that I was involved in? And what they said was that the work I'd been doing on Haelo, not intentionally, I'd been researching a problem, and I'd been come up with solutions to that problem, and sometimes come up with novel solutions based on my own experience across a number of different industries. And I'd thought deeply and I thought long and hard about this problem and these solutions. And they says, well, we think that potentially you could convert all that research you've done for your business into a thesis. Now, it was never set out that way, so I had to restructure things to fit in with the structure of a thesis, and then obviously get it to a point where I could submit the thesis and go through the examination. But I had an opportunity, and I thought it was time bound, because I thought when I start to travel again, it might not be as easy to then devote as much time to the PhD. So I pretty much worked on the PhD from the day I decided to do it to the day I finished and submitted the thesis. I worked on it pretty much every single day, apart from about 10 days. And that was a 13-month period. As I said, every single day I would get up at 5:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, get a shower, get something to eat. From 5:30 until 8:30 every morning, I'd work on the thesis. And then at 8:30, I would start my working day. That would usually be somewhere between 8, 10 or 10 hours plus per day. So it was a challenge doing it. I don't regret it for a single second, because I learned, wasn't so much I learned about the topic, because I definitely did. I learned a lot about myself. I learned, as much as I've written many reports, I think that the way in which I critique things now has been enhanced by doing the PhD. And the nature of a PhD, you're not taught anything. It's all about self-learning and research and literature reviews. But I'm much more critical of, when people say things, is there a basis to what they say? And many times people just, espouse an opinion that's baseless. And sometimes organizations get themselves confused, and, we're chasing shadows to some degree because somebody said something, but there's no basis to it. So I'm much more rigorous now, that if somebody says something, says, okay, based on what gives you that belief? What evidence is there to support it? And in many cases, there is evidence to support it. But as I said, I think sometimes organizations can waste a lot of times talking about conjecture and assumptions that have got no basis to it.
Yes.
And that's helped me, as when I've chaired meetings, is be a much better chair of a meeting, because I can come in and, do it the right way, but challenge people on what they say and say, okay, what is the basis of what you just said?
Yes, brilliant. So you reminded me of the book I read, A Miracle Morning, which is being on top of your game before 8 o'clock. And how does it feel? Was it stimulating for you to do maybe 2, 3 hours of rocket science thinking, to put it one way, and before you did a day's work?
Yeah. Well, I found, I knew before I started the PhD, but I definitely knew when I did the PhD that I was doing a day's work and then trying to pick up the PhD at the end of the day. And it just wasn't for me, because when around 5 o'clock, I start to get a bit flat. It's not the right time for me to be doing that. But ironically, I get a second wind at 8 o'clock in the evening, and then I can go until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning quite easily. So my circadian clock is, I'm an early bird. So I like to get up early. As soon as I'm up, I'm on it, and I'm sharp. So I thought that's the best time for me to do it. Again, it wasn't easy, but certainly in the early days, the thesis had 75,000 words as a word count. And after a very, very short while, I could see the word count going up. So that was fine. The most challenging part of the PhD, or one of the most difficult parts, is I think that last probably 4 months at the end of it, which is really wrapping the whole thing up, making sure it comes together as a coherent argument, is the bit that's not particularly rewarding, very challenging, but you've got to go through it, and everybody else knows who's done a PhD went through the same pain as I did.
Yes. Putting the last stone is probably the hardest, right?
Exactly.
Yes. So you've reminded me of two things. One is in terms of productivity, and for business owners watching this, really, one is finding your flow, so that being in the flow, being in your flow, which is you achieve a lot. So the best time of the day for you to work on that. And the second thing was being consistent. So every day, you mentioned, I worked on it every day except maybe 10 days, okay, which would include, I presume, Christmas Day and whatever.
Yeah.
So having that consistency, and that routine,
Absolutely.
it compounds, right? It compounds. Because it's like going to the gym every day. You build muscle.
Absolutely. I did a talk just before Christmas on the topic of success, and what is success, and what constitutes success. And probably everybody's got a slightly different view of it, but my view is there's four things that create success. The first thing is desire. What is your desire? Do you really want it? How much do you want it? How hungry are you for it? Belief. If you've got a desire to achieve something, do you believe you can? Because if you don't believe you can, you'll self-sabotage. Action. To me, the most important thing in life is taking action. You can have all sorts of thoughts, you can come up with all sorts of very fancy looking PowerPoint slides. Unless you commit to action, nothing will change. And then the final part is that consistency. So to me, if you've got desire, you've got that belief, you'll commit to action and you're consistent, the chances are you will succeed. And I've found in life, every time I've applied that, I have succeeded. Anytime I've failed, either one of those things or all of those things have been missing. And a great example for me is going to the gym. So I've got a desire to get healthier. I might say, okay, I now believe I can do it because I've done it before. And then I'll join a gym, and after a few weeks, then I'll find excuses not to go.
Yes.
So I think it's how do you then, I think, recognize your own habits, recognize your own behaviors, and then change those, because those are the things that were then stopping me achieving what I wanted to achieve. And I think sometimes from a gym point of view, I'm not particularly a big fan, but I then started to run and I enjoyed running much more. So I was still doing the same. I was getting healthier, I was getting fitter, but I was also doing something I enjoyed as well.
Brilliant. It's very interesting to see your angle on success. The three words I had in my head about success was, one of them you didn't mention. So one is passion, to be passionate, that's desire. Commitment, which I guess is consistency. You need to be committed to be consistent. And then talent. Having, if somebody wants to play the piano, if they are clumsy and hopeless, you need at least a minimum level of talent. But that's great. It's very, very good. Desire, belief, action, and consistency. I believe in action. You can see there. Sorry. That's excellent. So just to wrap up a little bit, Mick, what would be your advice for your 18-year-old self?
So I'm a creative person. So I've got a big imagination, which are both positive things. But sometimes what comes with that is overthinking. And sometimes overthinking can create anxiety. So I think if I could go back to my younger self, I would say, don't fret so much. Don't overthink things. Sometimes deal with what's in front of you. I think the old saying is, a today is worth two tomorrows. I think sometimes we can, particularly in my case, you would overthink things. You come up with worst case scenarios. Sometimes you catastrophize. And these things were never ever going to happen. So I think it's learning to rationalize and say, okay, this could happen, but it's unlikely it will. So if there's one bit of advice, and I would still give myself that bit of advice today, I've learned a lot between now and when I was 18. But that's probably at least one bit of advice I'd give myself is don't fret so much.
Yes. Excellent. I have this mantra of think, plan, act. In that order, think, plan. I don't say in the thinking or planning, you move on to action. Stop thinking and start acting. Brilliant. Well, Mick, what can I say? It's been a real pleasure to have you with us today at the Business Spotlights, and thank you for sharing your experience and wisdom. Thank you so much.
Perfect. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.